Don't worry about my father. The company's mine now. He's just a name on the letterhead. My son said that at a Chamber of Commerce dinner to a room full of people I'd done business with for 40 years. He didn't know that one of those people, an old friend of mine, was recording a video of the toast on his phone. And he didn't know that the video would find its way to me by morning. My son stood up in front of that room, raised a glass, and told them all that the old man had finally stepped aside. He told them the company was his. He told them a new era had begun. There was only one problem with my son's new era. I had never given him the company. Not control, not authority, not one share beyond the small 3% his mother had gifted him years ago. He had a title, an office, and a salary I paid him. That was all. And rather than correct him, rather than call him that morning and set it straight, I made a decision that some people will call cold. I decided to let him believe it. I let my son walk around our town for 2 more months, telling everyone the company was his. I let him plan his new era. I let him get comfortable. Because by the end of those 2 months, I had called a board meeting, the first one in 3 years. And my son was about to learn, in front of every person whose respect he'd borrowed, exactly whose name was on the shares. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Frank Dawson. I'm 73 years old, and I started Dawson Freight 44 years ago with 1 used truck, a loan my wife co-signed with her teacher's salary, and a route nobody else wanted. I've been a quiet man my whole life. Quiet men build things. Loud men explain why they deserve the things quiet men built. My son, unfortunately, turned out to be a loud man. Let me tell you how it was built, because you can't understand what he tried to take until you understand what it cost. Myself. Margaret did the books at our kitchen table at night, after teaching all day, with a baby on her hip. I missed birthdays. I drove through ice storms. I once slept in the cab for 2 weeks straight because we couldn't cover a motel and a truck payment in the same month. Margaret never once complained. She'd just say, "We're building something, Frank." By the time our son was in high school, Dawson Freight had 30 trucks. By the time Margaret passed 6 years ago, it had over 100, and 300 people drew a paycheck from the thing we built at that kitchen table. Our son, Craig, grew up watching the company get bigger, and somehow learned all the wrong lessons from it. He saw the trucks. He never saw the ice storms. He saw the money. He never saw his mother doing books at midnight. Craig wanted the harvest without ever once asking about the planting. I gave him a job out of college, and I'll be honest with you, I gave him too much too fast, because a father wants to believe. Vice president at 30, an office bigger than mine. And Craig was good at the part of business that happens in restaurants, the handshakes, the golf, the talk. But the actual work, the freight, the drivers, the margins, the 4 a.m. phone calls when a truck breaks down in another state, Craig had no patience for any of it. "That's what we have people for, Dad," he'd say. After Margaret passed, something changed in Craig. He started talking about the company differently. Not the company, my inheritance. He started saying things like, "when I take over." Not if, not someday, but when, like it was a bus he was waiting on. And he started, gently at first, suggesting I was slowing down, that I should enjoy my remaining years, that the business needed younger energy. 2 years ago, he came to my office and asked me directly to sign over controlling interest. He had a whole presentation, and I told him the truth, calmly. I said, Craig, you'll get everything someday, but you'll get it when you've shown me you can carry it, not just wear it. He didn't speak to me for a month, and when he came back, he'd stopped asking. That should have warned me. A man who stops asking hasn't given up. He's found another way. Craig's other way, it turned out, was to simply act as if it had already happened. It was small at first. He moved into the corner conference room and started calling it his office. He started signing letters, Craig Dawson, principal. He told a supplier I'd had for 30 years that all decisions ran through him now. When the supplier called me, confused, I almost corrected it. But I was tired and grieving still, and I told myself it was ambition, not theft. A father's eyes are the last eyes to open. Then, people around town started congratulating me on my retirement. The barber, the bank teller, a man at church shook my hand and said it was well-deserved, 44 years, time to rest. I'd smile and say I wasn't retired, and I'd watch confusion cross their faces. And I started to understand that somewhere out there a story was being told, and I wasn't the one telling it. And then came the video. My old friend Pete, 40 years in freight himself, sent it to me with one line. "Frank, thought you should see this." The Chamber of Commerce dinner, my son standing, glass raised, in a suit I probably paid for. "Don't worry about my father, the company's mine now. He's just a name on the letterhead. Dad had his era and it was a fine one, but the future is standing in front of you." And the room applauded. That whole room applauded my funeral, and I hadn't even been sick. I watched that video 4 times at my kitchen table. The same table where Margaret used to do the books. I'll tell you about that table, because it matters. It's a cheap laminate thing from 1981, one leg shimmed with a folded matchbook for 40 years. Margaret could have had any table she wanted by the end. Mahogany, marble. She kept this one. When I asked her why, she ran her hand over a burn mark from her midnight coffee pot and said, "Frank, this is the boardroom where every real decision ever got made. The other rooms are just for announcing them." She was right, as usual. Every hire, every truck, every risk we ever took was decided at this table. The two of us, after the town went to sleep. So when I needed to decide what to do about our son, this is where I sat. And I want to tell you what I felt, because it wasn't rage. It was something colder and more useful. It was clarity. My son hadn't just gotten ahead of himself. He had buried me alive in front of my whole town, on purpose, as a strategy. Because here's the thing about telling everyone the company is yours. Once enough people believe it, it starts becoming true. Suppliers reroute to you. Bankers call you. The old man becomes a ghost in his own building. Craig wasn't confused. Craig was executing a plan. You don't accidentally say, "He's just a name on the letterhead." That sentence is written in advance. So I sat there, and I thought about Margaret and what she'd say. And I knew exactly what she'd say, because she said it to me once about a dishonest partner we cut loose in the early years. "Frank, don't argue with a liar in private. Liars win in private. Put the truth somewhere public and let it do the work." So I didn't call Craig. I didn't correct the barber or the bank teller. I let the story stand. I even, God forgive me, started playing into it. When Craig announced he'd be representing Dawson Freight at an industry conference, I told him that sounded fine, and I watched him swell.
Craig took my quiet for surrender, because loud men always do. For 2 months, I let my son enjoy being the owner of a company he did not control. Those 2 months were harder than they sound. Twice a week, I'd hear some new piece of it. Craig told the country club he was restructuring the old man's mess. Craig interviewed a consultant about rebranding, new name, new logo. My 44 years to be painted over like a wall. One of my oldest drivers, a man named Hobbs, who'd been with me 26 years, came to my office with his cap in his hands and asked me, quietly, if the rumors were true that Craig was taking over. Because, he said, "Frank, the boys are worried. He doesn't know us." I looked at that man who'd driven through every winter I had, and I said, "Hobbs, tell the boys to sit tight. Nothing in this company moves without my signature. Nothing." And he studied my face for a second. Then he smiled, because 26 years teaches a man to read his boss. He said, "You're up to something, Frank." I said, "Tell the boys to sit tight." He never asked again. But drivers talk, and I believe the boys slept better after that. And while Craig enjoyed it, I did 3 things quietly with Marcus Webb, my lawyer of 30 years, a man Margaret picked herself.
First, we pulled the corporate records and confirmed what I already knew but wanted certified and stamped. I owned 92% of Dawson Freight. Craig owned 3%, a gift from his mother on his 30th birthday. The remaining 5% sat with 2 old partners. Craig had never been given a single share beyond that 3%. His title, Vice President, was a job I could end with a signature. Everything he'd been telling the town was air. Second, I had Marcus quietly document everything Craig had been doing. The letters signed principal, the supplier he'd redirected, sworn statements from 2 managers Craig had told in writing that the old man's sign-off was just a formality now. And the video. Marcus watched the video and said, "Frank, in 40 years of corporate law, I have never seen a man testify against himself this thoroughly at a dinner party." And third, I called a board meeting. Dawson Freight's board was small and mostly ceremonial. Me, the 2 old partners, and Craig. Marcus would attend as counsel. We hadn't formally convened in 3 years. I had Marcus send out proper notice, on paper, certified, everything by the book. The agenda had 1 line: review of company ownership, governance, and officer conduct. Craig called me the night the notice went out. He sounded amused. "A board meeting, Dad, that's cute. Bit of theater for the old days." And I said, "Something like that, son. Wear a good suit." He laughed. He actually laughed. He thought the meeting was going to be the formal handover. He told people that. He told the town the board was convening to finalize the transition. He walked into that room believing he was walking into his coronation. The meeting was set on a Tuesday morning, 9 o'clock, in the same conference room Craig had been calling his office. He'd even had the chairs rearranged, so he sat at the head. When I walked in, he was already there, holding court with one of the old partners, telling a story, laughing. He'd brought a bottle of champagne and set it on the windowsill. "I want you to remember that champagne." He gestured at the seat to his right, the seat I'd occupied at the head of that table for 40 years, like he was doing me a kindness. I took a different chair, middle of the table, and let him keep the head. It didn't matter. The head of a table is not where the power is. The power is in the papers. Marcus called the meeting to order, read the agenda, and slid a single folder across the table to each seat. And then, in his flat lawyer's voice,
He began. Item 1. Certified ownership of Dawson Freight Incorporated as of this morning. Franklin Dawson, 92%. Craig Dawson, 3%. Remaining 5% held by the minority partners. There has been no transfer, sale, gift, or reassignment of any shares in the past 11 years. Mr. Craig Dawson holds the title of Vice President, an at-will officer position, serving at the pleasure of the majority shareholder. The room was very quiet. Craig's smile was still on his face, but it had stopped meaning anything. He said, "Okay, sure, formally, but Dad and I have an understanding. This is just paperwork catching up to reality." And Marcus said, "Item 2." Then he opened the second folder. The letters signed principal, the supplier statements, the two managers' sworn accounts of being told my sign-off was a formality. And then Marcus turned his laptop around, pressed play, and my son watched himself, in high definition, raise a glass and tell a room full of people, "The company's mine now. He's just a name on the letterhead."
Nobody said anything for a long time. One of the old partners, a man who'd known Craig since he was in diapers, looked at him the way you look at a stranger who's been wearing a friend's coat. And then I spoke, for the first time in the meeting. I didn't raise my voice. I have never once in my life needed to raise my voice. I said, "Craig, 44 years ago, your mother co-signed a loan on her teacher's salary so I could buy one truck. She did this company's books at the kitchen table until midnight with you asleep on her shoulder. Every share of this company has her fingerprints on it. And you stood up in front of this whole town and buried us both while we were still breathing because you decided the harvest was taking too long." He started to talk. I held up my hand. And for once in his life, my son stopped talking. "You told everyone I gave you this company," I said. "I never did. But here's what nobody in this room knows, son. I was going to." Craig stared at me. "Marcus drew up the papers 2 years ago, the month after you asked me. A 10-year transition, shares transferred as you earned them. It's in his office, in a folder with your name on it. All you ever had to do was carry the work and tell the truth. Instead, you skipped both and went straight to the toast." I looked at him. "You didn't lose the company today, Craig. You lost it at that dinner. Today is just the paperwork catching up to reality." His own words handed back to him. I watched them land. Then the board did its business. By the book. Craig was removed as vice president by majority vote, effective immediately, for conduct and misrepresentation. All documented. His 3% remained his. I don't steal, even from thieves. Marcus informed him that any further representation of himself as controlling owner, principal, or authorized decision-maker would be met with legal action. In writing. Certified. And I announced the new succession plan. My operations manager, Diane Reyes, 22 years with the company, started as a dispatcher, knows every route and every driver's kids' names, would become president with a path to ownership. The daughter I never had, Margaret used to call her. The room approved it in 4 minutes. Craig sat through all of it in silence, at the head of the table he'd rearranged, the champagne still on the windowsill behind him. When it ended, he finally said, quietly, "Dad, it was going to be mine anyway. Why does it matter how I talked about it?" And that question, that exact question, is why he was never ready. I stood up and put on my coat. Then I said, "Because the company was never the reward, son. The trust was. And you sold it for one round of applause." And I walked out of his office, which by then was just a conference room again. That was 5 months ago. Craig sold his 3% back to the company a month later, through lawyers, at fair value. I made sure it was fair. He's working for a competitor 2 towns over, telling people, I hear, that he left to escape his father's shadow. Let him. A man who lies about a shadow will lie about anything. And now everyone knows it, which is its own kind of prison. Diane runs the company better than I did, if I'm honest. The drivers would walk through fire for her. Last month, she put a small brass plaque in the lobby, without asking me, that says, "Founded by Frank and Margaret Dawson, 1982. Both names. When I saw it, I had to go sit in my truck for a while. The old one, the first one. I still keep it in Bay 1, and it still runs. And the champagne? Craig left it on the windowsill. It sat there for a week, and then one Friday, Diane opened it with the whole office. Plastic cups all around, and they toasted 44 years of Dawson Freight, 300 jobs. And Margaret. I'm told it was a very good bottle. My son told everyone I gave him the business. He thought if enough people believed a thing, it became true. But a company isn't a story you tell at a dinner. It's a loan co-signed on a teacher's salary. It's books done at midnight. It's 44 years of showing up. He wanted the letterhead. He forgot to check whose name was on the shares. I let him believe it right up until the first board meeting, because some lessons can't be told, they have to be convened, called to order, and entered into the minutes.